Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. And before we start, just a quick reminder to subscribe if you still haven't subscribed to my channel so you can get my videos every day in your home feed. Now let's get started with today's first story. This post is from the subreddit Relationships and it's by user Throwaway and a lot of numbers. I, 26 female, made a pros and cons list about my boyfriend, 28 male, because I'm desperate for clarity. Together 3 years. Is it salvageable? Personally, I know that when you're to the point of making a pros and cons list, the relationship is probably over. But I need to write this out somewhere and get some clarity. I desperately want to salvage it because he's the love of my life and he is all the potential in the world. Some pros. He puts others before himself. He'll give someone his last dollar, no matter if it sets him back. I like how he isn't materialistic. He's loyal. I've never seen him check out another girl in 3 years. I trust him 100% and have never felt tempted to look through his phone. He's an amazing lover. He's incredibly giving in bed and gets me there every time. Also attentive, slow foreplay including long massages with oil. Zero complaints in the physical aspect of our relationship. He can be very thoughtful. He gives me gifts that make me tear up, takes my shoes off after a long day, buys me unexpected snacks, and has written me love letters. He makes me feel beautiful and gives me compliments often. He is great with kids and says he desperately wants kids with me one day. We seem to have similar views on parenting and are both fairly strict. When we've babysat his little cousins in our apartment, he always asks them to thank me and be respectful of my things. He's the best looking man I've ever seen. Facepalm? He charms everyone he meets and I'm very attracted to him. Even his smell drives me crazy. People say he's very charismatic. He supported me through rough times. I don't want to get into detail, but he'll definitely hold me while I cry kind of thing. He has potential. He's highly intelligent, funny, can do comedic impressions, is musically gifted, is athletic, is a great cook, is handy around the house, etc. I absolutely love his mother, and she treats me like her daughter. I get along with his family and friends, even though we have very different backgrounds. He doesn't have anger issues. He communicates very calmly. He's good at reading my emotions. He trusts me, gives me space, and encourages me in my hobbies and career. And I have a lot of respect for him. He's been through a lot. Based on his childhood, he should have ended up in jail or a drug dealer. I cut him a lot of slack because he has a tough life and his parents never taught him about money or life skills. Considering his life, he's done very well for himself. However, the cons. He will not seek treatment for his mental health issues. I think 80% of his problems would disappear if he got help. Sometimes, after a fight, he'll agree to go, but he never does. I feel like I'm living with Jekyll and Hyde sometimes. He'll be very happy and goofy one day and like a robot the next, or cranky if he doesn't smoke. He also doesn't take care of himself when he's depressed and doesn't consistently brush his teeth, shower daily, or eat healthy. Or eat, period. He refuses to go to the dentist or doctor for checkups either, likely due to money, even though I've offered to pay or make appointments. Which leads me to... he's bad with money. He doesn't pay off his loans. He eats out every day unless I buy the groceries and pack his lunch. He doesn't blow money on stuff for himself, but between weed, eating out, and helping out other people, it disappears quickly. His mom still helps him some, and I've lent him money before. He doesn't want to get married or have kids until he's financially stable. Valid, but I think that day may never come. I want to start a family before 30, ideally. Actually, earlier would be ideal, but I'm not rich either. I'd like to have a house and more savings first. He has had 4 jobs in 3 years, which I don't mind. I don't want him to be unhappy somewhere, but he usually leaves on a negative note. He's usually right about a lot of things, but sometimes I think he should pick his battles and not have such a problem with authority. He is a very hard worker though and gets promotions easily. So basically, I think he has the potential to be a great husband and dad, but I think his stubbornness is preventing that. Is there any way to get him to go to the doctor or get better with money? Ultimately, he has to make a change, but I wish there were something I could do. I don't like ultimatums, but I think I'd rather do that than just break it off without giving him a real chance to get it together. I don't need perfection or a big house or someone rich. I just want him to be able to pay his bills and be happy. Even if therapy and meds didn't help him, I would probably stick by him, sad and all, but him not even trying bothers me. Every time I start thinking about breaking up, his depression subsides, and he's happy and wonderful again. If he were a grump all the time, it would be easier to end things, but when things are good, they're unbelievably good. I just want more consistency and stability. Help. Sad face with a tear. Alright, OP, well, there's two things that stick out to me. All the pros, fantastic, he's a great guy, he's got potential, great lover, all that stuff. The things that stick out to me the most is one, he refuses to do anything about his apparently mental illnesses that he has. And two, he gets happy and wonderful when you start thinking about breaking up. The one question I have with this second point is, have you ever told him that you're thinking about breaking up and that's when his depression subsides? Because maybe he's not changing or, acting up to try to get you to stay. Maybe he's actually happy you're thinking about breaking up. I don't know, it just seems weird that whenever you think about breaking up, he gets all happy again. Just to think about it. In any case, OP, all those pros are fantastic. However, the big con that he doesn't want to do anything about his own problems, and that every time that you ask him, he says he's gonna do it, but then he never follows through. From all these stories that I've read, I've come to the conclusion that that usually means that he's not going to do it. So you've got three choices. One is the ultimatum, which, just like you, I'm not a big fan of. Two, you tell him that this is it. You can't do this anymore because you've asked him many times to do something about himself. He hasn't done it. Why would now be different? Or three, you come to terms that this is the reality of being with him and that's about it. Personally, I'd go with number two. You just need to know when to say enough is enough and move on. And what do you guys think about OP's situation? How would you go about it? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. The Purple Twist says, I think it's one of those things where you should sit down and tell him how much you love him and care for him. But if he can't get his crap together, you won't have a future. And if he can't respond positively to that in the following months, call it quits. And OP responds, thank you for the sensitive reply. It's hard. I think I'll likely have to get into therapy myself when and if I end things. I love him so much it hurts. Legal Throw says, I think this is a good example of someone can be a good person but a crappy partner. He's kind and giving and loyal, but he refuses to do anything that'll help him have a more functional or pleasant relationship with you. You can't force someone to make changes for themselves if they don't want to. The fact that only in the wake of arguments will he agree to get help makes me think you're never going to get through to him and get him some help. Without the motivation to change, which he doesn't seem to have, he's never going to be the consistent, stable partner you want and deserve. And OP responds, thank you. I think I'll write him a letter letting him know I need major changes or I have to move on. If we aren't meant to be, I'd rather end it sooner than later. Angramaniyu says, the cons you listed likely all come from the same thing, depression. So if you can somehow go with him to an appointment, it would work wonders. Please be patient, not by letting him delay the appointments, but by going there with him until he figures out it actually does help. And OP responds, totally agree. He said to me before that if he goes to therapy, he'll need me to go with him, and I'm very much willing to do that. Even if it took months or years to get that right dosage or meds, I'd be willing to do that. I know it would probably get worse before it gets better, but I'd go through it in a heartbeat. Alright, it seems like the majority of the community is more in line with OP coming to terms like with this is it. If he doesn't want to do something about himself, then she can't push him. And one person or maybe a few that are encouraging OP to be patient with him and get him to therapy by going herself with him. Which apparently is something that he also said that could work. So maybe it is worth a shot, but I'm not so sure about that. Anyways, it's time to move on to the update to see how this story ends, but so far, if you're liking this video, go ahead and click that like button, maybe write a comment, it helps me out a lot. Now, let's move on with that update. So, since a lot of you were very helpful, I wanted to update you guys. I sat my boyfriend down with a Dairy Queen Blizzard, lol, to talk to him about why he stopped going to therapy before we dated, and how his cranky, sad, numb, back to happy days were taking a toll on me, and whether he would consider going to therapy with me. He stopped me there and told me how he'd been feeling the past few months. He told me how exhausted he was from feeling like he'd disappointed me and how he feels like he's walking on eggshells because if he disagrees with me on certain things, I get upset. To clarify, I'm a very sensitive person, and if I feel misunderstood in a conversation, I will cry. This has led him to feeling like he can never be blunt or he has to be very careful in how he words things, which is totally valid and something I've gone to therapy for in the past. It was obvious to me that he was wanting to break up from the first few minutes. We spent the next couple of hours talking about where we both went wrong and apologized to each other. I told him I was so sorry for making him feel like I wasn't proud of him and made him feel like he couldn't relax or be himself. He told me how sorry he was for letting himself go. He also said he felt like he was holding me back in a lot of ways and that we both seem to be better version of ourselves when we're by ourselves, which is probably true. We held each other and cried a lot. He said he had a lot of respect for me and that I was worth every headache and asked me to please never date someone who wasn't worthy of my time. I told him that if he needed to go to bed or have some alone time to go and smoke, that was okay. But he said, "I've left you alone too many times in our relationship. The least I can do is be there for you tonight and hold you." Ugh, it hurts. I love him so much. I'm beyond devastated, but I know this is for the best in the long run. A relationship shouldn't be this hard 3 years in. I had no idea how much of his unhappiness was due to me. It hurts, but now I know what I need to work on going forward. I deeply appreciate him coming out with the truth and initiating the breakup because if I thought he wanted to stay together, I don't think I could have gone through with it. I'm not strong at all. I just set up an appointment with my therapist. I hope he can give me something to help me sleep for the next few months because I'm worried about how this will affect my attendance at work and such. I'm currently waiting for him to get off work so we can start deciding who is moving out. I told him he could stay, but he may be moving back to the town his family's in, so I don't know. So yeah, it feels kinda like a weird friend-roommate thing, lol. We've shared a few laughs, but I'm sure it'll get way harder before it gets easier. Still, I don't view it as a mistake to break up. Even though it hurts, I'm feeling relieved. I don't have to stress over the possibility of him being taken to court over unpaid bills. I can take a vacation without having to pay someone else's way. I don't have to worry about him taking his crankiness on me when he can't afford weed. I want a partner who wants to pull our money together to buy a place of our own, who wants to leave the house and do things, and who doesn't ask me for money advances. I have never fought in my previous relationships, so I think this particular one just happened to be incompatible. I will work on my issues, but the more clarity I get in the days after, the more I think that I'm fine just the way I am. My previous ex-boyfriend of 4 years loved me just the way I was and liked my type A personality, so I think it's mostly just incompatible here and neither of us is a bad person. Finally, I do think that I was a great girlfriend in a lot of ways, and I put up with a lot of difficult problems, but I'm really trying to see the good in the situation. I am mad that he didn't disclose more of his feelings sooner, but if he had brought this up months ago, I know I would have been more devastated. So I'm quite happy it played out the way it did. I've only started to think of breaking up a few weeks ago, so I'm rather glad he didn't break it off a while ago. He probably should have, but for my own benefit, I'm glad it happened the way it did because by this point, I was coming to terms with the idea of us not being together. I know it wasn't all my fault, but I'm willing to take responsibility for my issues, and I'm trying not to dwell on all of the reasons he caused it to end. Thank you all for your comments and support. I hope I find an easy relationship one day, but for now, I'm going to hit the gym, take an art class, and get back to the things that make me feel good. Alright OP, well considering it's a breakup, it seems that you're doing well, so I'm gonna call this a happy update for you and your ex-boyfriend. And even though you think that you may have been a great girlfriend in a lot of ways and that he was a great guy as well, you guys just weren't compatible and weren't gonna work together. So all in all, it's a really good outcome that this relationship's over. Now it's time to work on yourselves and move on with your lives. So on that note, here's wishing you the best in the future OP, and thank you so much for sharing. Now, let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user EconGuy101A. Mid-2000s company issued cell phone malicious compliance. I work in IT. Some are surprised that I tended to shun cell phones for most of my career. I didn't get one until about 2013. But a big part of the reason was that I knew that, working in IT, if I had one, my employer would expect me to be on call basically 24/7 with no additional pay or anything. There was and still is a social expectation that you answer your phone, or at least reply via text, no matter where you are or what you're doing. Out on a nice date? Too bad, the boss is calling. Dinner with the spouse? Too bad, the boss is calling. Driving your kids to some important medical thing? Too bad, the boss is calling. If and when you aren't quick on answering calls or messages, it's always a talking to the next day at the office. Despite the fact that 99% of your job can be done remotely, but that's another topic. It has always been this way for IT staff, and it won't ever change. So early in my career, around 2005-ish, I worked at a small to medium business of around 50 people. Help desk and network admin working for an IT manager who had no real technical skills to speak of. Didn't understand IP addresses, how or why different versions of MS Office have slight variations in their user interface. Didn't understand how FlexLM floating license checkout works, etc. But was good with crystal reports, so they were the IT manager and I was the flunky. This person spent about 80% of their time micromanaging my time and making sure I wasn't idle for as much as 5 minutes of my day. At one point, a person in another department who was working late had some trivial nonsense problem with Microsoft Excel that absolutely 100% could have waited until the next morning to resolve. But he was annoyed that the IT manager was beyond clueless about solving his issue at 7:45 p.m. and the regular help desk network admin guy didn't have a cell phone he could call for off-hours support, so he complained. He complained the next morning by storming into the IT office and berating us, the IT manager and I, about how unacceptable the situation was, and then sent a 5-page follow-up email CC'd to half the company, including the entire executive staff, about how intolerable it was that this dumb pivot table crap didn't get resolved in the late evening. So, a couple of days later, I got pulled into a meeting with the IT manager and the HR lady. Reading the room, I felt like I was about to get fired or something. Not for nothing, but I was quite good at my job, and when I eventually quit a couple of years after all this, it took them over a year to find a replacement. But it was far worse. They wanted me to get a cell phone. I politely declined, which they were prepared for, as they told me the company would pay for me to get a cell phone. I asked if I was going to get any kind of salary increase, if I was going to be expected to actually answer it. My original employment agreement didn't include any on-call stipulations, and was told there wasn't any money in the budget for that. A blatant lie. The CEO sent us the quarterly earnings every quarter. So I said that I'd take the company-issued cell phone, and I'd even answer it after hours without demanding more pay, on one condition. I got to choose the cell phone and the carrier. They were delighted, agreed in writing, and were almost giddy as I got up and left the room. I found a Motorola Razr, at the time a new and very expensive phone with NTT Docomo, a Japanese phone company, that had the right kind of compatibility to work on the North American cell phone network, but retained a Japanese phone number and had an international roaming plan. I went out of my way to find the worst possible plan, and calling the phone would have incurred two-way international long-distance calling, plus the per-minute international roaming fees and all that. And based on some quick math, it would have cost them over $5 per minute in total to call me. A day or two after the meeting with my boss and the HR lady, I requested the follow-up and presented the phone and plan I had picked out. It was clear from the body language that they couldn't tell if I was kidding or not. The HR lady finally realized I was dead serious and asked why I picked something so expensive. I said with complete honesty, I find it almost offensive that you want me to be theoretically on call for an unlimited amount of time outside of the office, potentially disrupting literally everything I do outside of work hours, but weren't willing to offer me even 1 penny in compensation. Well, if someone wants to call me for support after hours, somebody, somewhere is going to pay for that call, one way or another. They thanked me and said they'd get back to me about it later. The topic of my getting a company cell phone was never brought up again. Nicely played, OP, and I absolutely agree. If you're gonna get phone calls to work after hours, then that should count as overtime. This was absolutely chef's kiss, OP. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.